Hello everyone. Thank you for checking out today's video. I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe. Let's get started. What was the hardest piece of news you've had to tell someone? I worked as a pediatric psychology fellow while in graduate school, PhD clinical psychology. This involved providing psychological services for all children in the hospital. One of my very first weeks I was shadowing a more experienced fellow, and we encountered a family whose child, 7-year-old, was hospitalized after she was in a car accident with her father. Her father died in the accident and no one in her family was comfortable directly explaining this to the child. They had used a lot of religious euphemisms about death. He's watching over you in heaven. He's with you in spirit, but this language is not concrete enough for a young child who doesn't really understand death. Sitting with this child, body brace, lacerations all over, very flat effect, and explaining to her what death was, that her father had died, and having to ask questions to make sure she understood, was one of the most traumatizing experiences of my graduate training. I can still vividly imagine her face while we were telling her, and the tears silently rolling down her face. I had to tell my boyfriend his best friend was the body found in the river after he had been missing for 2 days. This hits close to home. My boyfriend's little brother went missing for 2 days. They found his body in the lake behind his workplace, where he was reported missing. He was only 22. Had to call my girlfriend parents at 1 AM to tell them there was a bad accident, that their daughter was en route to her, and I thought she would be okay. She died on arrival. Worst day of my life. Fuck dude. I can't imagine the pain you must have gone through. I hope you are kind to yourself. The kicker was slashes I was in that seat she was in, moments before, overcome by the need to get out and drive my own vehicle. We were just loading into car to leave. I got out and offered her to come with me in my car. She chose to stay and slid over into my seat. The seat that hit the tree would have been me. Her brother was my best friend for 15 years before. Telling someone's family that we are giving up on searching for their loved ones who are lost at sea. I've been a person that received that news, and I could only imagine how hard it must have been for the Coast Guard to decide that. They made an incredible effort in stormy weather. We didn't find out until later that my friends had been shot and thrown overboard. There was no chance for survival and nothing other than their boat was ever recovered. I always wanted to send a thank you letter to the Coast Guard, but 12 years later I still can't get past the first 2 lines. I joined search and rescue as a way to try and pay that back, but it proved to be more than I wanted to handle emotionally. So, thank you for trying so hard to find our loved ones. If you don't mind me asking, what's the story on that? Was it pirates/smugglers or something? My friend's husband owned a charter fishing company. The booker accepted 2 men without IDs believing a story that their girlfriends had their ids on an island the men were booking for. In reality, one was fleeing charges in another state and their intent was to steal the boat. After my friends were reported missing, the Coast Guard located the 2 passengers on the lifeboat associated with my friend's boat. They had money, weapons and a BS story about pirates killing everyone but them. There was enough evidence to convict the men, but one confessed to avoid the death penalty. There are crime shows that feature it, but so far none of the books or shows have been able to just tell the story without over-dramatizing it, making it feel like they tarnish the memory. The show Dark Waters will do an episode this fall. They seemed respectful when I spoke to them. Let's hope they are. I won't be in the show because I declined to be named or on camera. Not really something I want to bear in such a way. To tell my mom her husband had been molesting me for multiple years and that I wasn't going back into her house. Telling my mom in detail what my dad had been doing to me since I was a child was the most painful thing I ever had to do. I had to tell my wife that our 8-year-old son had died in the night. He was on hospice and it was expected, but that was still hard. Then I had to phone my older children and tell them. Thursday will mark 2 years. Professionally, I had to tell the parents of a 20-year-old basketball star that his drug use did not account for his unusual thoughts and behaviors, that he was, in fact, psychotic and likely schizophrenic. I can't even fathom such a thing. I choke up when the invasive thoughts come in of what kinds of awful things could happen to my own son, and it terrifies me. I commend any parent that still finds a way to keep going after losing a child. I hope you've been able to see some brighter days after all that darkness. My brother, who was active military at the time, had to be granted emergency leave for my mother, who was on her deathbed after a short but destructive battle with cancer. They took more than 24 hours to sign one name on that document to release him, even knowing the circumstances. When he became noticeably upset that they were taking their time with it, they pulled him aside and threatened to make him undergo a psych evaluation for being, understandably, angry. She died while he was on his flight home. I had to tell him over the phone that he missed the passing of our mom and he wouldn't ever be able to say goodbye. That was rough. Oh wow, fuck them so hard for dragging their feet. Being in the military, I can attest to the lack of urgency a lot of administrative staff has. All it is to them is more paperwork, and the higher ranks never get around to it promptly because it's just another leave form. It drives me insane, especially in circumstances like this, when these people are supposed to be your brothers and sisters, but won't sign a piece of paper in an expedited manner. I had to tell my mom that the bike that I reported stolen to the police was under the fucking porch. Okay, this was a nice breather after all the horrific death stories I've been reading. TBH, that would be terrifying had it been my mother Mayo. Tell my dad, who was in the hospital 2 weeks away from his own death, that his father had died. Dad hadn't yet accepted that he himself was dying, though my sister and I could see it. Grandpa had been in hospice for 2 months, so we all knew that his end was near. In the week between Grandpa's death and his funeral, Dad began to accept that he didn't have much time left. Dad made it to Grandpa's funeral, albeit via ambulance/wheelchair, and saw his extended family for the last time. That was a surreal experience for me, watching him say goodbye. That must have been heartbreaking for you. It was. I had buried my mom's mom, and Dad's mom at the rate of one funeral every 13 to 14 months for the years directly preceding Dad's death, a total of 5 funerals in less than 5 years, and been responsible for Dad's end-of-life medical care and decision making, so I was all but numb by that time. Still hurt to watch the realization hit him. And to watch the realization hit everyone else that my dad wasn't going to last much longer when they saw him at the funeral point again. Surreal. Bar regular of mine almost fell to his death washing windows in a 4-story building. He miraculously survived yet broke every bone in his body and cracked his skull. First responders were firefighters right near Houston Street and Broadway in New York City. If they hadn't responded, he would have died right there. Fast forward 4 weeks later, September 15th, 2001. He is out of his coma and finally able to be taken home by his sister and out of hospice. Barely able to speak, he manages to whisper that he wants her pass him by the fire station 2 blocks down so he could thank his rescuers. His sister had to then explain the black smoke still lingering in the air, the entirety of the 9/11 attacks, and that every single first responder that helped him perished. Sometimes that worn out older man sitting at the bar day drinking red wine has a really good story to tell. Broke my heart. This is one of those stories where you don't have anything to add and just kinda sit like damn. I headed up a few departments at my last job, and as dept head, I had to be the one to fire people in those departments. It always sucks, even if they are the worst and totally deserve it. Never feels good to take away someone's security. I worked at a company that would make you jump through hoops to fire anyone. So if after a couple of months of me trying to work with somebody to get them on the right path didn't help, they would get fired. The job wasn't especially hard, so I always felt better with the thought that if the job was really important to them, they might have pushed a little harder to keep it. My dad found me right after I drank bleach, was 14, attempted suicide. Had to explain why my room smelled like bleach to a man slowly losing it as he pieced together what was happening while in excruciating pain. Edit: I drank the bleach as a last resort. It wasn't my first attempt, so all other methods had been locked away. I guess nobody expected I'd choose such a horrible way to die. Knives and medication were in locked presses. No good place to hang myself. Didn't want to waste police resources by going off somewhere and drowning myself to never be found again. I was admitted to psych ward. My dad made me chug milk and I dealt with stomach ulcers, but was relatively okay after some time in hospital.